Hey Isaac, beautiful work this week. So nice to get your video and so enjoyable to listen to your progress. Like you're really understanding everything I'm trying to tell you, and you're doing it beautifully. So Claude number 14, excellent work. As a general guideline to all your playing and everybody's playing, you're working with really, very much into the physicality of the playing here with this kind of work. And always the solution to any issue, not that you have any particular issue, but the element of growth that we're always cultivating is relaxation. So look for easier and easier ways and lighter ways in your body to produce the results that you're getting. But it's really, really good. It was really good that you slowed down at that one point where it became a little more accurate. I forget what articulation that was. That's why there's no mention of markings for Claude Gordons. We want to get them kind of at the faster end of things, but never faster than they're under control. And sometimes in different slide positions or with different articulations, we need to slow it down so that we can do it right. And so just, full marks for what you're already doing. Definitely move on to number 15. Great work with that. The scales and the solfege, I wrote down in my notes, wow, excellent work here. Nice consistent articulation, so that's really taking hold. That it really elevates just the impression that you make. You can have a beautiful sound, beautifully in tune, but if the articulations are kind of random, you know what I mean, like ta-da, blah, 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 Buddha, Buddha, it just sounds bad. But when the articulation are as consistent as what you're doing, it just sounds good to anybody. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the slide position philosophy. I think I've talked to you about it before. And I think you more or less get it. So particularly when there's no valve involved, it seems to me that you're using a sixth position for the F and D flat major and those kinds of things. Fifth position for the B flat and C flat major, or the A sharp and B major, etc. So that's all good. But there's a way to use the valve. Particularly getting a low B flat or A sharp with the valve, we can really facilitate. So for example, in F sharp major, and I'm sorry, my bass drum one is in the shop right now, so I can't demonstrate with an actual valve, but it's the F sharp major, so fifth position for F sharp, of course, third position for G sharp, and then with the valve down, a little bit of a flat, a lower third position to give you that A sharp, and now you've got that semitone motion to B, and also with the trigger down. Similarly, exactly the same thing in G flat major, fifth position for G flat, third position for A flat, a little bit lower third position with the valve for B flat, and then there's your C flat right next to each other, semitone. Another place where that trigger B flat comes in really handy is in A flat major, in that lower octave that you're playing. So, third position, A flat, no trigger, sorry. The lower third position, B flat, and then C and 6 D flat. So that B flat and third in that case is not facilitating a semitone, except that it means you don't have to go all the way from first to 6, or similarly to play this B flat on first, C with the trigger, and now you've got a rough semitone trying to go from first position trigger C to D flat and fifth, and not getting a nice smooth semitone. So that it solves both those issues. You play the third position A flat, of course, the B flat with the trigger, C and 6. So I think you'll find that really nice. Just a little bit of refinement there. There's also some considerations in the upper octaves for valve, for slide positions and valves, not valves, but slide positions up there. And so it might be useful for you to play whatever tune you're playing in whatever octave you want, but to play a 2-octave scale in most range, even 3, whatever works, whatever makes sense, just to make sure that all those slide positions are good. So great work with that. Keep going. Probably time for a new tune. How about Over the Rainbow? And like Twinkle, you probably don't need to play the whole thing, but playing all of Over the Rainbow would be a good longer term project. But I would start with do, do, ti, sol, la, ti, do. That would be an awesome amount, and it actually covers that part of the scale that isn't covered with Twinkle. Right? You don't get it. There's no ti do in Twinkle. So that would be a good one to go to, or any tune of your choice. But just to help, I'm suggesting Over the Rainbow. Roshu, another big check mark. Awesome. I wrote so much better I would continue to go for perfection of articulation, but I would say that it's like you've gone from, frankly, not a good legato to a really good legato that could be further refined. So that's a huge leap. So I would just go for absolutely perfect so that every articulation is the same. And of course, notice that these vocalises were composed specifically to train people in this exact technique. Now, specifically for singers, but it's the same technique, right? It's the same issue that we're talking about. So it's got all these jumps. It's got notes that are quite close to each other, da, da, which is easy. Da, da, wah, ooh, da. All of a sudden we leap, and you want the articulation to be the same. You want the note connection to be the same, the note lengths to be the same, whether they're right next to each other or whether they're parts of big leaps. And that's exactly where those few inconsistencies in your playing is coming off. So that's where to look to really polish it up. If you can get those right and matching everything else, it's going to be just so exquisite. Really, really beautiful work here. I need to see this music because I don't know where your phrase marks are, and I'm hearing breaths in weird places, which suggests to me that you're ignoring or somehow fudging where those phrase marks are. One of those things that does happen, I'm pretty sure, if I can remember the tune, ba-da-dee-da-dee-da-da-da-dee-da, or something, da-dee-da-dee-da-da-da-dee, and I'm hearing you go, ba-da-dee-da-dee-da-da-da-dee-da-dee-da-da, da-da-da-dee-da-da, and I don't think that's where the breath is. I don't think that's musically where the phrase ends. So it means we have to take a breath in between two eighth notes. And that's another thing that's intentionally done in the music so that we're able to do that. So you don't want to skip that. You want to master it, right? So I need to see the music so I can help you with that. And yes, those octave Gs were perfect. You totally fixed the rhythm in that. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and I'm not hearing a lot in terms of dynamics and stuff, and that's kind of another layer of this work. But I wouldn't leave it till later, right? Try to play everything that's on the page for sure, but also insert these kinds of shapes in each phrase to make real musical sense of it. And I think you'll find that the kind of the emotional content of the music really starts to come out, and the whole piece seems much more interesting and dramatic to you when you start to do the dynamics that are written and impose these phrase shapes as well. But awesome, really fantastic. Arbenz 31 and 32, another big check mark from me in my notes. Nice, clean articulation, full marks. That's so good. Nicely in tune too. Some of the upper notes, F, E's, E flats, are a little on the high side, but I actually noticed that more dramatically in the Galliard, so I'll talk about that there. To get maximum benefit out of the Arbenz, play even shorter notes. So more space between the notes and less duration. So we're really just dealing with the very first instance of the note coming out, but just that. That's all we want to deal with. And so what you're looking for is the length of note that you would be playing at the fastest tempo, which is going to be quite a short note. And so it's going to sound a little weird when you do that at a short tempo. So you might be going, and at a slower tempo, that's going to be a little bit ridiculous, right? But these are studies, and that's what they're for. So I think you'll find that everything really kicks into gear if you start to play those super short notes. Something that I think you might find quite interesting and valuable in your own study is now that you've recorded some of these things, go back to the one you recorded for me this week and listen to those Arbenz studies at different speeds. Certainly at a slower speed than you recorded, put the video on a slow speed for playback, and you'll hear any inconsistencies really clear. You'll hear, da, da, wah, wah, but anything that's not perfect will come up. But perhaps even more interesting and valuable, put it at a fast tempo, put it at like twice the tempo, and you hear yourself go, and you realize, oh, that's what it's going to sound like when it goes fast. And having that mental image of how things can sound so clean and so good and so in tune, and all the notes right in place, can be quite an eye-opener and suddenly make things possible. So I really recommend doing that. I put in my notes double tonguing with a question mark because I can't tell if you're double tonguing, so I need to keep checking. please do double tongue the eighth notes. Hopefully you are doing that. So just confirm that for me if you wouldn't mind, and definitely move on. You're definitely done these 2 studies. Move on. It's really, really good work. The Galliard Siciliano, beautiful, amazing actually. Quite amazing how you made such a clear distinction on the page for those that were tongued and those that are slurred. Now that kind of very strict interpretation of the markings isn't always appropriate, but it's a great place to start. And we need that kind of control of the articulation. And it really takes what you're learning from the Arbanz, what you're learning from the Rochut, and now puts it in a true musical context. So you can really play with taste and interpretation. So that's beautiful, beautiful work. I'm really delighted with that. The rhythm in bar 2 isn't correct. So if I remember, dum ba dee da dum, bum ba dee da da, and you're putting a little hiccup in there like bum ba ba dum ba or something. I'm not sure exactly. It doesn't matter what's wrong with it, but it's just 1, 2, 3, and 1. Da dee da da. So those 16ths flow right into the next beat. There's no break. The bar line doesn't represent a break in rhythm or flow of 16ths or eighth notes. And then here's where I wanted to mention again the Fs and Es. There's no E. I don't think there's any E flats in this piece, but it would apply to E flat in 3rd position, or if you played a D in 4th position. All of those notes on most trombones, on most brass instruments, that partial is sharp. And it's sharp enough to be in tune, like that F is sharp enough to be in tune in a B flat dominant chord, which is what the harmonic series is. But if that F is not sounding over a B flat, then it's going to sound sharp. If it's sounding over an F, it's going to sound sharp. Like the octave isn't going to be in tune. And if it's the third of a chord, like say a D flat major chord, it's going to be way sharp because thirds have to be low. And again, Ds, that other partial, tend to be a little bit flat so that they sound in tune. A lot of that's been engineered out of brass instruments, but that partial is still sharp on most instruments. So you need to fix it, and you have to be cautious because sometimes we get trained into hearing what the instrument sounds like, and that teaches us what we think in tune is. We get kind of acclimatized. I felt that really dramatically with bagpipes. Like a lot of people hate the bagpipes because it sound they say things that sounds like you're strangling a cat or something, and what they're referencing is it's a different tuning system. And somebody gave me a beautiful hand-built chanter, which is like the practice thing that you learn to play the bagpipes on. And I'm like, what? And I had this book and stuff, so I just kind of messed around with it. And it was amazing to me, like suddenly, over a very short time, I acclimatized to this weird tuning system. And now I was kind of hearing it because I was actually playing the instrument. The instrument teaches you a certain kind of tuning system. And we don't want to get trained into a non-Western tuning system. Right? We want to use the same tuning system as singers and string players and pianists and everybody else if we're going to play the trombone in a classical setting, right? So be careful about that. So that's the prime place where we can kind of mistune our ears with that particular partial. So you get a tuner out, you play the middle F, get it in tune, and then go up to the upper octave. And the tuner goes like this to the sharp side, and you go, oh, what? And then you put your slide out so the tuner comes right. And then you start going back and forth and start to retrain your ear to what does that F sound like when it's in tune with the lower F? What does that sound like? And then maybe put it in context of the tune or whatever else you're working on. Same thing with 2nd position E's, 3rd position E flats, and you may as well move on to 4th position D naturals, because sometimes we do use those. And you may find that the slide adjustment is greater as you move further up the slide. So I would definitely work with that. Dynamics are completely missing to my ears. So I don't hear any written dynamics. I said the same thing in the Rochut, and I don't hear any phrasing that you would artistically add, interpretively add to that. So that really needs to be there. Now you don't necessarily have to stay with this one if you don't want to. You can go on to the minuet and do all the same stuff I just said, for sure. So I'll leave that up to you. I'm happy to hear either one or both next time. Summertime is excellent. I like your whole thing. I'd like to suggest to you that you make your jazz playing much more about the rhythm. That it's like, all music is jazz music. All music is jazz music. All music is dance music. All music is dance music. I think that's a real important thing to recognize as musicians. All music is dance music. But jazz music is more literally jazz music. If you're playing in a jazz band, another name for a jazz band is a stage band. Another name is a dance band, right? Like the function of these ensembles was originally to support people coming into a space to dance. So the more you can make it danceable, the more authentic, and the more you're going to realize, yeah, this really makes sense in this context. So make that your number one priority, I would recommend. As far as the soloing goes, I'd like to suggest two approaches that come together. One is what I hear you kind of already doing. You said you were doing chord tone soloing. It didn't sound like that to me. What it did sound like was you're paraphrasing the melody. So you're playing, more and more interpreted versions of the melody, and that's a really cool way to go. And there's some people who feel that's how you learn to improvise, and that has a real tradition to it because, back in the day, people didn't talk about improvising, say in like, sort of really pre-jazz times, like even pre-Louis Armstrong, Dixie styles. And there was no written music, and there were all these tunes that even then were old tunes. And people just had their way, I really like how Isaac plays Summertime. He's got a Summertime that's really cool, and somebody else plays Summertime a little bit differently. And it's not about improvising particularly, but ultimately that's kind of where that came from, right? Or improvising came out of that in a way. So that's one philosophy of teaching improvising or learning improvising, is to just further and further mess with the melody. Another approach, which I think is also really important and can come together, is chord tone soloing. So I would literally go through what are the chord tones up to the 7. You could include the 9 if you want, and restrict yourself to just those notes. What can you do that would be cool with just those notes? And then you'll find that as you're paraphrasing the melody, you can use the chord tones. And when you're playing chord tones, you can keep track of where the melody is, even if you're really far from the melody. And that's kind of an essential element of this whole process, no matter what tack you take, is you always want to be hearing the melody in your head, whether you're paraphrasing or using chord tone soloing. You always want to be hearing the melody and associating the melody with the chord, so that by knowing the melody, you always know what the chord is. Okay, so that's the beauty of this kind of work. So beautiful work you're doing there, and that's what I recommend to keep moving forward and keep enjoying it. And you mentioned in your email you're doing Kona Cole in your university courses. I think that's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. That's the first I've ever heard of that. So that's a big improvement, I would say. They sure as heck never mentioned Kona Cole when I was in university. So I'm so glad. I'm very interested, if you wouldn't mind sharing what text you're using. Very interested what materials you're using. And I would still recommend you check out that link, and I put it again in your notes, and to see, is it the same, is it different? If you've already got a pretty solid grounding in Kona Cole, you may not need the first 2 in that series. It's a 10-part series, but you may find the third one really valuable and interesting. But I'm very curious as to where you are with all that. All right, my friend, great work this week. Have a great week, and I look forward to your next video.